Hello everyone, I built a lottery as a service application, deployed it to AWS, and it's talking to Temporal Cloud. Let me do a quick demo here. So I have a comma separated participants list. I can enter a number of winners, hit run lottery, and this talks to Temporal Cloud, runs a workflow, spits out my winners here. So I'm going to go over high level of how this all came together. And you can also check it out here at freelotterypicker.com. So first off, what is Temporal? I've done a number of videos lately, but basically it's a durable execution engine that lets you run your code reliably inside workflows. So the workflow is a temporal term. So if I go back to my application here, when I hit run lottery, this goes and creates a temporal workflow in Temporal Cloud, Temporal Server, and it runs the business logic here to actually grab all of these names. So if my application crashes, these winners would be saved because I have a durable execution platform called Temporal. So if my application happens to restart or crash or have some error, Temporal saves all of that state for me. So this is not the poster child use case for Temporal, but I just wanted to get some simple application out there just to test out Temporal Cloud and get something out running into the wild. So let me go over exactly how I did this. So high level, I'm using Temporal Cloud. I'm using AWS App Runner to actually run this instance. So this is a Docker image that I've deployed out to AWS App Runner. And App Runner just runs basically Docker containers for you and makes them publicly available. And then I use AWS Secrets Manager to manage my secrets for connecting to Temporal Cloud because it's a pretty secure connection to Temporal Cloud. So first off, Temporal Cloud, what is it? It's basically Temporal's service for running Temporal Server for you. So you can run the server yourself, but you have to manage it and learn how to deploy it and secure it and all that stuff. But they provide a service for you to actually just connect to a temporal instance. When I was first looking at this, I was like, wow, this is pretty expensive, just to try this out. But luckily I found a post that lets you run a free trial of Temporal. I think it's at least 90 days long or something like that. But anyways, I use this post and I'll link it below for you to actually start playing around with Temporal Cloud. Okay, so once you set up Temporal Cloud, you'll set up a namespace and you'll give it it'll give you a URL to connect to. And then you also, if you're running with the Java SDK, which I am, to connect to Temporal Cloud, you need to enable MTLS when you actually create your namespace in Temporal. So that was a big gotcha for me. I just did the API key route, and for some reason I could not get it working. I think they've implemented an enforcement where you need to have MTLS if you're connecting from an SDK, at least the Java SDK. Okay, and then there's a number of tutorials here and documentation on how to connect. So this is the one I found most helpful. So connecting to Temporal Cloud, they have a sample application over in GitHub on how to pass in all of the different keys, endpoint, and namespace into your application to actually create the client. So eventually you pass in all these options to create a client, and then you pass this client to the worker that actually will do the workflow code running for your application for Temporal. All right, so yeah, I think I highlighted this, but I'll just highlight it again. So it says each Temporal Cloud service client has 4 prerequisites. So that's the namespace, the endpoint, and then you need to enable MTLS. So you enable MTLS in the Temporal Cloud, and then you generate the certificates. I believe there's a command line here to do that. I remember running some things on command line to be able to generate these certificates, but just know that you need to enable all of these. And then in your application, you need to pass in these private key and certificate so that you can connect to Temporal Cloud. So I had a lot of trial and error actually connecting to the cloud. All right, so I deployed it with AWS App Runner via AWS Copilot. So I've done a few videos on Copilot before. It's basically a CLI that lets you build your Docker image locally, send it out to ECR, which is AWS's cloud repository, cloud registry for Docker images, and then it'll deploy your application to, I think it's ECS, and make it publicly available. So it's very simple inside the CLI, and I can link to a video that I've done on that in the past as well if you're curious. Okay, and then I used AWS Secrets Manager to store all of those certificates for the MTLS. So there's a lot of things that you need to store securely for your application to run against Temporal Cloud. So I've put that into AWS Secrets Manager, and right at boot time, right when I start up my application, I go out and fetch these secrets, these certificates, use them in my application. Let's see, I'll show you this here. So right as my application's starting up, it's not localhost, I go in and I configure the keys, and I have all this code out in GitHub as well for you to reference. I basically grab everything from Secrets Manager, add them into my client, and then configure my client and my temporal worker. And that's how it works behind the scenes. Okay, so that is the basics of how I got it working. I also put a fun custom domain on there as well, so you can try this out on your own time. I guess just quickly, this application has a backend, has a simple backend and temporal backend. The simple backend is just running this stuff in memory, which is probably sufficient for this application. If you think about it, it's just a list, and then I shuffle the list and grab the first 4 elements from that shuffled list. So if I run it in, the in-memory, a simple way, you can see the performance is really good. But if I run it through Temporal, which has to go out to Temporal Cloud, create a workflow, run the workflow with a worker, it takes a little bit more time to actually generate. But at least I'm connecting to Temporal Cloud and it's all working. So that's basically the essence of why I built this application. I'll link all these different resources I found helpful in the description below, and let me know if you have any comments. But that is it for me here.